All right. Thank you, Letty. So I'll pass this over to Erin, who will be introducing our first speaker.
Thanks, Vanessa. And that was great. And I will share in the background, I was listening and participating. That the difference that I heard in when we didn't know what we were doing versus when we were all on the same page and how we came together was also really special. So that was awesome. Thanks, Vanessa. So I'm excited to introduce our opening speaker this morning. Yesterday, you guys will hear a little bit about the work that I step into and how it relates to the YMCA. And I did share the last two words of the YMCA mission, which are for all, but the full YMCA mission, I realized I didn't share that, which is to put Christian principles into practice through programs that build a healthy spirit, mind, and body for all. And we're striving to make sure that we are able to do that for individuals with dignity. Right. And so our next speaker, her bio is in there, but one of the things it says that really stands out to me is creating and maintaining equitable experiences for professionals. And we need to create and feed our staff so that in our leaders in the Y movement and in all areas, so that they can deliver on our promise to be for all. And I shared a quote yesterday as part of my presentation. And this is the most millennial thing I'll ever do. So one of the quotes was, ultimately, a person has within themselves some kind of capacity, some kind of asset, like knowledge and or confidence. And if we can help bring that out, they then can carry that asset with them to the next difficulty in life. And this is where I talked about how equity work and creating belonging benefits everyone. And when we change those systems, it benefits everyone because individuals from marginalized communities don't have those opportunities. And we've missed out, right? And so this quote for me embodies the work that Shanna takes on a daily basis and really steps into an uphill battle of creating opportunities specifically for Y leaders, all Y leaders, to have leadership development and opportunities because she believes, as I believe, that we need to make sure we're representing our communities to fully serve our communities, and we need to change what we look like and make it so that we are not so white at the top because we need leaders who are representing and have that diversity. And I so admire and feel so honored that I get to work with her because I'm so inspired in how she shows up and how she creates spaces that foster belonging, where people say, I do believe in myself, I do see myself here, I feel that I belong here. And Shanna creates those spaces for Y professionals and has created those spaces for me. And so I'm really excited to introduce her to this community. And one of the other quotes I shared is that belonging happens when people feel seen and accepted. And every time I'm in a space with Shanna, that's how I feel. So I'm excited to share her with this community. And so Shanna Smiley will be our next presentation.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
As Erin shared, my name is Shanna Smiley, and I serve as the Director of Multicultural Leadership at the National YMCA of the USA office. I live in Orlando, Florida, and I flew in from Chicago yesterday. So actually, I just got in at 3 a.m. this morning. So if I fall asleep up here, please throw something at me. But I'm here to engage and have conversation and dialogue with you around what it means to really put a focus and emphasis on me and how that can help serve you in your journey towards the we. And as I understand it, you all had some amazing conversation around that yesterday. So I'm really just here to build upon that and to add to it. This is an interactive session, so there's going to be moments in the slides where I'm going to ask you to just jot down your thought or reflection on a question I might pose to you. But this really is all about you. And so as we move through this conversation, I want you to be putting in the framing of me and how I show up and navigate and experience the world around me. And so for folks in the room, we've got some interaction and some activities to play for you, as well as folks virtually. And so I'm seeing all of you online and waving at you as well. And it's only gonna be as interactive as you want it to be. So if I say, hey, let's do this, family, and you're like just staring at me, then we're gonna be staring at each other for a really long time. So I really hope that you're willing to lean in, and I know it's early in the morning, but I used to work for Disney World, so I have a lot of energy, so we're gonna do this. You ready?
Yes.
All right. All right, so this conversation about from me to we, and what that really means in the space of self-awareness. And I picked this image here on the main slide because I wanted us to really think about where we are in the universe, like our dot in the universe, and that connection of self to others around us, and how we really are all connected, and what that means to us in our experiences on a daily basis. Okay, no worries. I would have just pretended I was looking and you could just. Okay. All right, so let's move into what this looks like. The first thing I always start every session, every workshop that I facilitate is around our commitment to the conversation we're getting ready to have with each other. And we're going to identify our keyboard together. But really, the commitment to each other and what we're going to do in this conversation is really talking about how are you going to be willing to be present in this dialogue. So just taking a moment to silence your phones, to not respond to any messages or emails, trust the people that you have left back home to leave where they are leaving. How we will be willing to speak our truth in these conversations and make sure that we're bringing our voice into the conversation. It's only as vibrant as you're willing to contribute to it. What you will be doing in terms of active listening and listening to each other, and recognizing that there is a broad spectrum of dimensions of diversity, including diversity of thought. So there may be things that happen in the conversation today that you might not agree with, but we can respect those thoughts and feedback in the conversation as well. And I can't see what Miriam wrote in the chat. Not trying to be humorless, but upon reflection, I'm uncomfortable with the phrase white dudes in suits. Oh, did that happen earlier? Okay, all right. Well, Miriam, I'm sorry, and I completely understand what you're saying, and I wish I knew where that was. So let's unpack it in a moment once we get things moving on the slides. Oh, I think it was when you were asking what the program used to be in. Okay, it's valid. It's a valid reflection. So thanks for sharing it, Miriam, and we'll talk about it for sure. I'll try to bring it into the conversation today. And that's what we're talking about, speaking our truth. We talked about keeping an open mind with humble curiosity and recognizing that we're all experts of our own lived experiences. And so you're all bringing something unique to this table, to this conversation. And I want you to be thinking about it from your own life journey, your own lived experiences, especially when we start talking about things like bias and what that means for us on the individual level. Be willing to experience discomfort because that's where growth happens. You can't grow if you're sitting on a fluffy couch, not going anywhere. So I'm challenging you to get off the couch, to get uncomfortable, because that's where true growth happens. And then the last thing is expecting non-closure. So recognizing we're going to spend about 60 minutes together, diving into some topics around self-awareness and what that means for me as an individual on this journey. But recognizing that in 60 minutes, you're not going to have all the answers that you need. That's just part of the journey, and hopefully you'll continue learning and exploring that conversation. And I know there's other workshops happening today, as well as what will happen beyond this leadership symposium or summit, as you all call it. Everybody feel good about these community agreements? Okay. Can you click the name, please? All right. I chose this amazing illustration in this image just to speak to the vibrance of our differences. And so imagining that you are one pencil on this screen behind me, and you get to choose what you want to be. I'm not really going to say which one or assign any colors, but thinking about what pencil really represents me, what is the color that I bring to any illustration, to any environment that I find myself in, and then recognizing the vibrance and connection when we're all together. The tapestry that we create when we're all together. And so understanding the unique value of ourselves on the individual level, but also how much more we bring to the table when we are all together and the vibrance that we are able to create. I'm just going to point to you. Okay, good. All right. So this image is really how we're going to challenge the conversation here this morning. How do you see yourself? So this is a deep dive in self-reflection and understanding that you're challenging yourself to think about yourself, because often when we find ourselves in leadership of service, which I believe most of us in this room are, we're in service to something or in some way or some capacity in our communities. We're serving and paying attention to others, we don't often make time for ourselves. So this 60-minute time frame is about you and understanding and reflecting about you and what does that mean for self. Next slide. This framework is something that we use at the national office to support and engage all of our YMCAs across the country. And this is what we call our WISE approach to advancing equity. And I thought it was important to share this image with you because, as you can see, it's a journey of growth as we aim to achieve equity, as we embark on a journey to achieving equity in everything that we do. But it starts at the very top with individual learning. And it's key. It's a key priority for us to focus on and make reference to, because you can't get anywhere. You can't achieve any deliverable, any metric, any goal if you don't start with self. And we recognize that that is important to do at every level of our growth and development path. And so the individual journey is where you do the deep reflection, where you do some assessments, where you build awareness and understanding. Who am I? How do I show up at work? What are the biases and behaviors that I need to be aware of? And how are they manifesting for me in my day-to-day experiences? There may be things that have happened in your life, in your childhood, in your adulthood, that may feel unconscious or even implicit in your experiences, but they're manifesting in your decisions that you're making on a daily basis. They're manifesting in how you communicate or how you behave or how you interact with others, and you may not be aware of it. And so it's important for us to do an understanding and exploration of that at the individual learning level. And once you can get past the individual space, once you've achieved awareness and an understanding of self, that's when you start to move towards that we. And what does that mean in terms of our collective approach at an organizational level? What does that mean for us at the team level in our approach and our strategic plans and how we engage with our vision and our goals as an organization or as a team? And once you're able to achieve that at the collective level, that's when you start to have impact on your community. That's when you start to have impact and change and see measurable change and growth and delivering on our commitment to the people and the individuals in the organizations and the communities that we serve. And then, of course, that's how you get to the ability to measure change and see what the metrics are so that you can make adjustments and pivot for the next approach in your journey. And so I thought this framing was important for us in this conversation from me to we, because it's something that we do and it's embedded in the foundation of everything that we do in this equity work. And so I thought it was key for you to see and where you insert yourself on this trajectory. You all started talking about this conversation yet? Are we having conversation about the individual level and what does that mean for us? Or are we really focusing on policies and procedures or other things that may be happening at the organizational or team level and kind of skipping past that individual starting point? The point of that conversation is you can't get anywhere if you don't start with the me part. Next slide. All right, so we do something at the national office called our Dimensions of Diversity Wheel. I decided not to show that illustration here because it's pretty heavy. It's 3 layers deep in terms of all the various dimensions that someone may choose to identify as it relates to self. And so I decided to summarize it here in a little smaller version of this dimension of identity. But I wanted to put it here for you to think about and reflect on here this morning and just take a couple minutes to just jot down what are the dimensions that I identify with. Which dimensions of identity do I believe I use most often as a lens when I'm moving and navigating through my day-to-day experiences? And so as you're looking at the image here behind me, I want you to just jot it down on a piece of paper, and if you're online, jot it down for yourself as well. It's not a test. I'm not going to ask to see your homework, but I want you to think about what are my dimensions of diversity that show up for me on a daily basis, that I navigate, that I know that I'm aware of, and I know that it's top of mind for me on a daily basis. So just think about 60 seconds. What are your personal dimensions of identity? Is it top of mind for you to think about race or ethnicity as it is for me? I identify as an Afro-Latina. My mother is from the Dominican Republic. My father is Black. That will never go away from me. I walk in any environment, any door, any building, and someone's wondering, where are you from? What are you? Where are you from? The kind of questions I get, we can have a whole nother workshop on that. But I know that it's key to my identity. So I know that that's a key core dimension for me. as well as my gender, as well as my ability, etc. So thinking about what does that look like for you? Okay, we good? All right, next slide, please. Okay, we're talking about self-awareness. We really wanted to frame it as an awareness of your thoughts, emotions, and development needs, which are aimed at improving your capacity to manage your behavior. And I'm not going to do a deep emotional intelligence workshop. That's for another day. If you want to learn more about EQ, I've got you. I've got you on that one. But we did want to do a few tips and tidbits for you to think about when you are on this journey of understanding your own self-awareness. And so one thing that we often recommend to individuals is when you're trying to understand you and self, a good place to start is by seeking feedback from others, asking others about your strengths and developmental areas, and create some goals around those things. And one thing that we often talk about in our work is, do you have what we call a personal board of directors? And a personal board of directors is a group of people in your life that you trust for feedback. And if you imagine yourself as a CEO of a company, you're the CEO of an organization. I'm Shanna Smiley, LLC. I'm the CEO, and I'm sitting at the head of a table, of a board table. Who is sitting around that table for me to ensure that I'm going to be successful? And you want to be thinking about some key positions at that table in your life. And I'm going to name a few for you to think about. Someone at that table, you want to be a cheerleader. Someone in your life will always be a cheerleader for you, no matter what you're going through, no matter what's going on, who is cheering for you. It could be your mom, it could be your best friend, it could be a coworker, it could be one of your children, but they always have something positive to say. That is your cheerleader. You need to write that person's name down because they're sitting at your personal board. Someone else you want at that table, just a minute. Someone else you want at that table is a coach. A coach is someone that will coach you through a specific scenario or a challenge that you're experiencing. And so I was struggling, for instance, in my life, and something happened, and I needed to get some guidance around soccer. You know, one of my children really is struggling with soccer, and I need some help to help, my child get better at soccer. Then I would go hire a soccer coach, someone who has expertise in that particular area. That's someone you want at your table, someone that you can rely on, that is a subject matter expert, whatever it may be, but you can typically call upon that person for help. You want that person at your table. So there's someone in your life that tends to show up as a coach for you in different areas and different topics, or maybe it's a specific one that you have on speed dial at any time, and you know they're going to answer. Write that person's name down. You need a coach. Someone else you need at your table is your truth teller. Who's going to tell you have a booger in your nose? Who's going to tell you that your hair is jacked up, or you're walking past someone and your dress isn't zipped up all the way in the back, and they say, I got you, let me zip you up for you before you walk out there and anyone else sees you. Who's your truth teller? You want to write that person's name down. Someone in your life that you know has your back and will tell the truth for you. You need that person at your personal board. Who do you have that's a sponsor? A sponsor is important. A sponsor is someone that will speak on your behalf even when you're not in the room. They've seen your work, they know your character, they know your strengths, and if you're not in the room, they're going to reference you. Oh, you know who would be great at that project? Such and such. I know because I've seen her do this, I've seen him do this, I've seen this person show up in this way, and they're advocating for you because of the experiences they have had for you. And they tend to show up as that sponsor role. Do you have someone in your life that's a sponsor? And if you do, write that person's name down. And by the way, as I'm moving through each one, if you're thinking, oh, Shanna, I don't have anyone in that seat, then you need to write vacancy. Because vacancy means you are now on the hunt to find someone in your life to fill that seat, because that's going to be important for you in your journey of self-awareness. All right, we got the coach. Oh, mentor. You need a mentor. A mentor in your life, someone at your table that you can go to for advice. A mentor is different from a coach because a coach has subject matter expertise in a specific area, where a mentor is just going to give you general advice on basically anything. Someone you can go to confide in for advice. And they're going to give you advice and mentorship and counselship to get through whatever scenarios or experiences you may be having. I think the last last thing I would mention is a connector. A connector is important because it's someone who can help introduce you to other people. Who's going to help you build upon your network? Who's going to help build up the relationships for you because of the relationships that they have? Is there someone in your life that you know they're really good at building relationships, interacting, navigating, connecting with people, and I know that they're going to help get me connected if I needed it. If I said, hey, I really need to meet someone in this specific area or this specific body of work, could you help introduce me? And you know this person will be there for you. So a connector will be key for you at your table as well. I would say those are the roles you want your personal board right now. There's a whole bunch more, and I'll absolutely write them for you for after the session to continue, but I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch what the function of the sponsor is. Could you say that again?
Sponsors who will advocate. Usain Bolt. Did you all know who Usain Bolt was? The Olympic sprinter, very fast sprinter, right? Gatorade was a sponsor for him, right? Gatorade saw how amazing he was an athlete, and he wanted to attach their name to his and endorse and advocate for him, even when he's not in the room, because they know the quality of the work and what he's going to accomplish, and they want to be attached to that. And they usually have influence. Someone who's a sponsor for you has influence. So someone who, I had a sponsor once who was a CEO in a local association when I was at a local Y, who was always putting my name in the hat for things. Hey, did you know that, hey, you need someone to lead this project? Shanna can do that. Or you need someone to lead this presentation for the association? Shanna can do that. I know I've seen her do that. Someone that's advocating for you is a sponsor. And it's typically someone who has influence and will be a champion for you when you're not around. Make sense? Okay. Any other questions? The personal board is key, and it's something that we don't often think about, and it's something that we often take for granted, because the reality is a lot of these roles that I'm talking about, you have them in your life. You just don't know that. You haven't formally recognized them in that way, and it will be important for you to start having conversation and thinking about it in this way, and going to those individuals and saying, hey, did you know that you're a cheerleader for me, and I see you in this way, and I appreciate that, and just know that I'm going to be calling for you, in the future when I need it. I'm really down in the dumps about it, and I know you're lifting me up. Recognizing it and acknowledging and verbalizing it to individuals will be key for you as you embark on this journey around your own self-awareness, because these individuals will help provide feedback to you and hold you accountable to the things that you have determined are goals for self and what I want to do in this journey around self-awareness. Okay, next. Realizing how your thoughts influence your emotions and behaviors. It's going to be key in your self-awareness to start to understand and pay attention to what are my reactions, what are my triggers, what are the things that show up for me. I used to do musical theater when I was in high school. I've been in 17 musicals in my life before I found myself in performing at Walt Disney World. And what they teach you in musical theater is if you're ever on stage and you're getting ready to sneeze or cough, they teach you to dig your nail into your finger. And dig your nail into your finger as hard as you can so that the pain of that, and you're doing kind of like behind your back, right? So the pain of that takes your mind off of the sneeze or cough that was getting ready to happen, and you won't sneeze or cough on stage. And if you ever notice, if you go to a Broadway presentation or a theater production, you don't see anyone sneeze or cough on stage because they have a tactic such as this that they're doing to keep their minds off of that sneeze or cough that was getting ready to happen. And it became so embedded in me and my behavior, and I didn't realize it until about maybe 15 years ago. I was having a conversation at work, and the person talking to me was getting very disrespectful, and it was starting to trigger me in some capacity. And at some point, he said, "Is there a reason why you're digging your nail into your finger?" Because I think I was doing it like off to the side, and I didn't know I was doing it. I didn't realize I was doing it. He said, "That's weird. I've never seen anyone do before." And I said, "Oh. I think it's because I don't want to say something I'm going to regret. I think I'm trying to prevent a career-limiting move right now. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it became my way of coping with a reaction that I didn't want to happen in any given moment. And so what I learned is anytime someone's getting ready to, or has said something or done something to me, or I was getting ready to say something I'm going to regret or probably would be a best representation of me and myself, that I was digging my nail in my finger to prevent me from doing that. And I wasn't even aware of it. And I learned in that interaction what I do to deal with something that starts to trigger me. And so I say that and share that example for you to think about what you do. Does your face change? Does your body language change? Do you have career limiting moves and you've said some things that you can't regret? You know, or do you tend to leave the room? I know people leave the room when they find themselves triggered. Do they overheat? I know individuals who turn bright red. I can see it visibly. What happens to you when you get upset or frustrated? So it's for you to start thinking about what are my thoughts and how are they influencing my behaviors, my emotions, my actions. Next. Understanding your hot buttons is what we just touched on as well. Making conscious choices about your reactions to others. I often facilitate conversation around crucial conversations and around career limiting moves is what I shared earlier. And that's when you say or do something that's going to have an impact on your brand or how people see you in any given environment. So being more intentional, thinking about it before you react will be key for you in your self-awareness. Next one. Monitor your level of resiliency and take actions to increase it. Resiliency is key in the journey of self-awareness and understanding your fortitude, your ability to navigate difficult situations or environments and how you choose to respond to them. And if you find that in this journey and exploration that you have low resiliency, then consider it a muscle that you can strengthen and get better at. All right. Imagine yourself as a thermostat, helping to maintain a constant environment in a room by detecting changes in temperature. You make adjustments when needed, and being mindful is key. This is the core foundation of self-awareness. Being aware and understanding what's getting ready to happen for you yourself, given the external factors happening around you, and making adjustments when needed will be key for you. Most times, we find ourselves in situations where factors may be impacting us in any given way. We just respond, but we don't have time to think about or make adjustments to determine what our actions and behaviors will be. And so that's the challenge will be for you in this journey around self-awareness, is understanding what's happening for me, physically, emotionally, mentally, all the things. Everybody okay? Have I lost anybody yet? Okay. All right. You can't talk about self-awareness without talking about self-care. And this was key for us in these conversations that we've had recently at some of the national conferences, and understanding, you know, even though we're showing up in our work and our day-to-day experiences, even at home in our personal roles and what we're doing as a parent, as a caregiver, as a sibling, as a daughter, as a son, whatever your roles may be on a daily basis, what are you doing to understand your own physical, emotional, and well-being to ensure that you are inoculating yourself against whatever internal or external factors may come in your experiences on a daily basis. So some things we want to make sure that you think about are, you know, are you assessing your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being? Are you paying attention to? Are you even aware that something may be off for you? I know that I'm a little physically exhausted because of how late we got in today, but I'm so emotionally excited that it's kind of washing it out. It's kind of balancing it out because I was excited to be here. I've never been at Silver Bay YMCA before, so I was excited to be here, connect and engage with you. But I'm aware of what's happening for me in some of the other spaces. And so what am I doing to navigate and pivot in those specific experiences? Implementing action to improve your physical health. If you know physically there are some things happening for you in the health capacity, are you doing something about it? Are you paying attention to it? Are you being aware and mindful to it? Or are you saying, oh, it's fine, I'll get over it, nobody knows about it, I don't have to talk about it, I'm too busy, I got things to do. That's typically what happens, and it's human nature. We move too fast and we don't pay attention to what our body is telling us. And so it's key for us in our self-care space to understand, because that's when stress takes hold, and stress can manifest into illness. And so this is key for us in these conversations as well. Integrating activities that restore your emotional strength. What are you doing in the emotional space? What are you doing to pay attention to the mental and emotional state of yourself? What are you doing to be aware of it, to talk about, to navigate, to understand it? Are you even paying attention to it? Will be key for you in this journey. Are you incorporating spiritual or grounding practices into your schedule? So whatever that means for you, spiritually, whatever your faith is, whatever your understanding is for grounding of self, is it part of your daily schedule in some way, some capacity? Are you doing something? It could be around meditation, it could be around journaling, it could be around prayer, it could be around just conversation. Whatever it looks like for you, are you being intentional about it? Because it's just as important as your mental and your physical. Are you effectively integrating the time spent on work and self-care activities? And I can guarantee you 90% of the people that I'm going to tell you on this one, the answer is no. We don't make time for self-care. It's not seen as a priority. We don't have time for self-care. Time is a construct in itself. That's a whole other workshop. So what are we doing to say, all right, take a moment, pause, step back. I need to schedule self-care for me. I got to schedule that for myself. And self-care can show up in an array of ways, a way of capacities. It'll be different for each of us, but the intentionality will be what matters most. Physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being are directly linked to developing and maintaining a healthy sense of me. And we're talking about me today, right? We're talking about me this week. What does that mean for us as we move forward in this journey? People who are physically healthy can withstand prolonged stress better than those who aren't, and that's scientifically proven. Since thoughts trigger emotion, the way you talk to yourself is critical in your emotional well-being. What is the self-talk in your mind? Have you paid attention to the self-talk in your mind? How many times have you sing a song in your head that you don't even like that song, but you're singing it because it's just happening automatically in your mind? There are thoughts just like that are happening in your mind that you're not even aware of, you're not paying attention to, and we're asking you to just pause and start listening and take control of that. Sigmund Freud has a whole lecture and study of books on the super id, the super ego, the talking voice in your mind. And is that voice in control or are you in control? And he often referred to it as having a roommate in your mind, a roommate that you're living with that's just kind of like living on their own and doing their own thing until you decide to become aware of it and take control of it. And spirituality provides meaning in our lives. And so we talked about the grounding forces a moment ago. What will you do to make sure you're intentional in that space? This slide is all about mental models and understanding that they are kind of the exploration and explanation of our thought processes and how we see and navigate the world around us. They are frameworks for us, shortcuts, if you will, that we develop in our mind based on our lived experiences that consist of assumptions that can show up in spaces like socialization, values, our beliefs. We talk about our education as well as our lived experiences. And mental models are key. They're important because they help us survive. With all the things that we experience and take into our minds and our thoughts and our experiences on a daily basis, we can't physically deal with all of them, with intentionality and mindfulness. And so we have to create shortcuts in order to experience life in a meaningful way. The problem with that is 99% of your thought processes are shortcuts. Only 1% of your thought processes are mindful and intentional. And that typically applies to when you're learning something new or you're trying to be intentional about a conversation or an experience. 1% of your mind will be intentional about that. The other 99% are shortcuts. And I'll give you an example. You are at work and you're focusing on your budget, you have the budget to do the next day, you're working really hard on it, you're having some really difficult conversations, and it's time to get home to make dinner or to have dinner with your family. And you're driving home, but in your mind, you're still going over those numbers, you're still thinking about that budget, you're thinking about what the meeting will look like tomorrow morning, the conversations that you need to have. And 20 minutes later, you find yourself in your driveway and you think, how did I get home? I don't even remember driving home, but you did because you've done it so many times that unconsciously you know how to get home. You probably crossed all kinds of stoplights, probably passed all types of recognizable destinations and restaurants and buildings that part of your daily route, but you didn't see them because you were busy having this dialogue in your mind about that budget meeting that you're having the next day. The reason you got home safely is because of the shortcut that you have in your mind. You know subconsciously how to get there. And that happens for you in 99% of the things that you do on a daily basis. Thinking about the interactions we have with people, thinking about the conversations we're having, the decisions that we're making, typically fall in the space of our frameworks of mental models. And it's important to call out this matter of perspective that tends to show up when we're talking about mental models. And so in this particular illustration, I thought it was funny as a cartoon, because you can see both individuals are standing on opposite sides of the image on the floor in front of them, and they see two different things. One person sees it as a 6, one person sees it as a 9, but they're both right. From their vantage point, from their perspective, they're both right. And they made the decision that in life, this is what it is for me. Even though the person directly across from them sees it as something totally different, they're both right. And so it's important to understand from the lens of perspective and vantage point, this can show up and manifest in our day-to-day experiences as well. It's not necessarily an either or I'm right or you're wrong, which tends to be how we navigate as human beings in the world, right? Through history, wars have been fought over beliefs and core values and understanding of what they saw or believed to be true. But it really is about a matter of perspective. And so when we're thinking about self-awareness and what we're paying attention to for self, it's understanding, well, what's my vantage point? What's my perspective? What am I seeing? Do I have the full picture, or do I have even the willingness to try to understand someone else's point of view in that particular? And that leads us to this conversation around implicit bias. Implicit bias is the ability, or this concept that our minds are creating these shortcuts and assumptions that tend to lead us to quicker but not always accurate outcomes and not always accurate experiences that we have with others. All of us hold biases, whether we hold associations, positive or negative, toward a person or a group of people. So it's important to think about, what have my life experiences been that have caused me to have a shortcut or a bias around a particular experience or culture or environment? What does that look like for me? And so that's part of your self-reflection and thinking about it as you're on this journey of self-awareness. Implicit bias describes when we have attitudes, thoughts, feelings towards people or stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. Implicit bias or unconscious bias is a reference around you're not aware that you feel a certain way about things, or that you behave or respond in a certain way about things because of your life experiences, and you won't be aware until you are intentional about paying attention. Next slide. We're thinking about how it shows up in our everyday interactions. It can show up in our perception, which is how we see the world, how we choose to see the world. Our attitude, how we tend to respond to whatever that may be happening in front of us or around us. Our behaviors, and what we might be thinking about, and how we choose to respond to those specific environmental factors or things around us. Our attention speaks to our willingness to give attention to or take attention away from any given thing. Our listening skills, do we have the desire to fully listen? How many times do we find ourselves in conversations when we're not actively listening? We may be even just thinking about or preparing what our response is going to be versus actually actively listening and leaning in and being present in those experiences. And then our micro affirmations or our microaggressions, the things that we're doing kind of subconsciously that tend to cause harm, or could be overly positive in some aspects, in a way that could be accommodating for whatever instance we may find ourselves in. How willing are we to provide comfort to some and not others is where micro affirmations come to fall into place. But all these things that we're talking about from a self-awareness standpoint is going to be key for us if we're really going to find ourselves embarking on a path towards belonging. And belonging is really this sense of self and understanding that I feel a sense of belonging in any given environment, and that I'm creating a sense of belonging for others, where we can have this collective understanding of value and inclusion in those particular experiences. And I learned that you had some conversations yesterday around some terminology of diversity, inclusion, and equity. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I know that you took good notes yesterday. But I do want to put these definitions here because they're part of the key ingredients that have to be in place for belonging to occur. You cannot achieve belonging without diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll show you the recipe here in a couple of slides. But just as a quick reference, the definition of diversity is the differences that make each person unique. When we talk about the definition of inclusion, it really speaks to, the next slide, please. It speaks to the intentional engagement of all persons within and throughout a community to the extent that they truly feel welcomed and valued. And when we're talking about equity on the next slide, it is ensuring that everyone has access to the same opportunities. And I would absolutely, be remiss to not mention that equity is not the same as equality. It's important to understand that those are two different terms and two different definitions. And often when I find myself in spaces, people may be using those words interchangeably. And I want to just make sure that we are in alignment and understanding that those are different. If I'm talking about equality, then that would mean I'm walking into this room and I say, hey, everybody needs shoes, so I'm going to bring a 7.5 shoe for everyone in this room. Does that help everyone in this room? To me, I work 7.5. Anybody else work 7.5? Right? I just help 4 people. But it doesn't help everyone, right? But equality says that's what I'm going to do. I recognize there's a need that you all need shoes, and I want to meet that need in a fair and equal way. So I'm going to bring the same thing for everybody. But we are on an evolution of understanding that it's much more than that when we're talking about equity. And equity means I'm going to take the time to learn and understand what your specific needs are and bring the shoe that you need and that you need and that you need. And that they're all going to be different, but they're going to give each of us the access we need to achieve what we're going to do. Does that make sense? Okay. So when you have all three things, diversity, inclusion, and equity, these are the key ingredients that you need. And I think they're animated, so you can just click through all 4. They're the key ingredients that you need to achieve this formula of belonging. And I'm going to unpack it on the next couple of slides, what happens when you're missing a key ingredient, because you have to have all 3 to achieve belonging. And I'm sharing this with you for you to think about in your environments, in your spaces that you navigate, the places and people that you are interacting with. What does this look like for you? Do you have all 3 ingredients? Is your formula complete, or are you still in the kitchen looking for a few more recipe pieces to achieve that sense of belonging that you're aiming for? And what does that look like for you in the spaces that you're navigating in for self? Do I feel a sense of belonging when I walk into X, Y, and Z? And if not, what's missing? And then on the flip side, as I'm aiming to create belonging spaces for others, what do I need to make sure is in place based on the formula that we're seeing here on the screen behind us? Okay. So next slide. If you only have diversity, the sole element that you have, the only ingredient that you've been working on and focusing on is diversity, then that looks like just playing the numbers game. You're kind of checking the box kind of thing. Diversity is our key priority, and so we're checking the box. We need this, this, and this. We're going to make sure we get those things and we check them off. It's a compliance mentality. It could be symptomatic of a culture that's functioning with a monocultural lens. And so unpacking that to understand, what's really at play in that space. And this thought around diversity of minds may be the key and most important priority of any goals or directives that are existing. When you're looking at here on the far right side, when you just have diversity and inclusion, then that means the dominant group of ideology is deferred to for making decisions and creating opportunities and promotions. And underneath that, if you just had diversity and equity, then there tends to be culture assimilation takes place. And it can result in disengagement and low retention. And this often is, as I'm traveling all across the country and having conversations with organizations, this is the one ingredient that most organizations are focusing on. Oh, Shanna, we just hired a diversity officer, and we have a diversity committee, and we're doing these diversity initiatives, and everything's diversity, diversity, diversity. But if you think about diversity like a glass of milk, and if I had this in front of you right now, I would totally show it for you in person. But if I had a glass of milk, and that's the environment that I'm trying to change, and I say, Shanna, I'm going to add some diversity, so I'm going to grab this chocolate syrup, this Hershey syrup. It's gotta be Hershey's, so that's I'm going to grab this Hershey syrup, and this is diversity. And I'm going to squirt the Hershey syrup into that milk, and that's all I do. Has anything happened?
Sinks to the bottom.
It sinks to the bottom. Syrup is heavy, right? I'm a science nerd. Syrup will sink to the bottom of that glass. That glass will still be crystal white. The flavor of the milk has not changed. The texture of the milk has not changed. Nothing has changed, but I added diversity. And that's what's happening. Until we are intentional about stirring that syrup throughout the chocolate or throughout the white milk, to change the flavor, to change the environment, to add vibrance and flavor to that experience, you're really not doing anything. You're just in this compliance mentality. And that's what happens when all you have is diversity. If the only ingredient you have is inclusion, then that tends to look like, we want to hear from everyone. Let's hear from everyone. Lots of climate surveys, lots of surveys, assessments, conversations with staff. Everyone is welcome. If you engage with us in our way or events or practices, you are invited. If you do it our way, you are invited. Focus on what we have in common and not acknowledging the richness in our differences. Often you'll hear language like, we don't see color. When you hear language like we don't see color, that's a minimization language. That's an effort to say you don't want to focus on differences because there's a fear. If we focus on differences, it could lead to divisiveness. It could lead to isolation or negative experiences. And so let's just focus on what we have in common. We don't see color. We're all one thing. You know, we're a melting pot. If you think of a melting pot, how painful that really sounds. If you were in a pot melting. But that's what we would say. And that's where it shows up in the space when you only have a focus on inclusion. And on the far right, you can see if you have inclusion and diversity, or if you have inclusion and equity, what tends to show up in those environments when you're missing the other key ingredient. Everybody tracking okay? We're okay? Okay. Next slide. When you only have equity, when your focus is only on equity and you're not touching diversity or inclusion, then you tend to provide what people need to thrive, and you tend to make efforts around adjusting policies, practices, and procedures to address the symptoms of disengagement. Why aren't people engaging? Why aren't team members engaging, etc.? Let's put this emphasis on equity. But when you do that, you minimize the differences for efficiency, and you tend to miss systemic issues that can lead to the symptoms of disengagement. And I know there were some conversations around, you know, what happens when we focus on the symptoms of an issue and not the root cause of an issue. And that's key here in this space when the priority is only equity. And then you think about it on the far right-hand side, what happens when you only have equity and diversity, or when you only have inclusion and equity, but you're missing that third key ingredient. This is why belonging isn't truly achieved. So on those 3 slides, we did an emphasis of understanding what happens when you're missing a key piece. And this is going to be important for you to think about in your own self-awareness journey towards belonging. What's missing for you as you're exploring that for self? So on the next slide, I'm asking this question for you to reflect on what's missing when you're thinking about your own self-experiences, your own individual journey, or even the organizations or the teams that you're a part of. Is there anything missing as we unpack this together? You know, Shanna is saying inclusion. Inclusion is a big focus for us, but you know what? I don't think we've touched equity yet. Or, you know, I think we've really been putting a focus on diversity and equity, but I don't think we've touched inclusion yet. Or, Shanna, I think we have all 3, but something's off, and I'm not sure what that is. It's worth unpacking as we go through that recipe slide, and we can spend more time on them offline. But something's missing if you don't truly have a sense of belonging for all, and not a belonging for some. And that's also key in this journey. All right, quick video around belonging, and then we have a fun activity to do.
You were, you know, somebody who's potentially could be a drug has substance abuse issue. She and engineers and have expectancy, like know a lot about computers. Person looks to be completely able-bodied. She made a comment about, we'll talk, worry about this, that's no sense. She's also here, is wondering beyond how we have access to these. Most women are leading to the age of people listening to this on her, she's leaving. Another long way dress, you lack her.
I guess kind of growing assumptions about what I was supposed to be, but it was the best thing for me to realize that I had been making those same assumptions myself.
We all like to think that we're inclusive, but sometimes we don't actually step back and think, wait a second, did I hear everybody in the room? I mean, don't judge is the message, but it's also hard not to. I always thought that every gay man was flamboyant and rude.
The generation is set in their ways. Initially, I thought there was something weird about a girl who would want to be a camera operator because of the word cameraman.
Is a world and a society. Other people's feelings and experiences matter.
Shomu Ganguly, but people call me Sam.
I am Layla, correct. But some
And there's a little technical difficulty, but hopefully you all got the gist of the video, and we'll definitely put the link out so you can watch it again. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
The words diversity, equity, and inclusion are wonderful, and they're labels. And it occurred to me that there may be a limitation to their efficacy. And what if just the simple concept of respect embodies all of them as a practice, and also genuine interest, as people were saying on the video, people wanting to know more about who we are. Just those two things, genuine interest and respect.
Yeah, I think you have to have at the core foundation, not just respect, but love. I think love is at the foundation of each of them, but it's important to be specific about what we want to address. And that's why the, labels of diversity, equity, inclusion were crafted so that it didn't get minimized or lost in the greater, approach, and then it becomes this melting pot. So I hear you, absolutely. And we don't want to take away from the efficacy of it. And did you all hear her question? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So just one moment. So at the core of everything is love and respect. And that is absolutely what was conveyed here in the video. If you don't have those two things present, then you really can't achieve real diversity, real equity, real inclusion, but it's a both and. It's a both and. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Did you have a question?
Now it's on, right? First of all, thank you so much for a presentation that was a very well linked to our pre-summit program. Excellent. I met you in Orlando a long time ago. Yeah, I used to work at Universal. Okay, all right. I also have a question for you. I've done a lot of diversity training with the U.S. State Department through the U.S. Embassy Network. And we developed this, in fact, I brought a copy of it. We developed this organizational continuum model to move from monocultural, exclusive club, lip service, tokenism, all the way over to valuing diversity. And today, it's still my opinion that we have a lot of tokenism that is still in place. And I'm challenged, as I'm sure a lot of people in this room are, how do we get rid of tokenism to move from monocultural to true multicultural organizations where we actually value diversity and not just talk about it? So that's my question. Huh? Charlie Walsh. Yeah.
Understanding what is happening for me at an individual level that could be preventing the multicultural journey for our team or organization. And that's real. And so there's an assessment that we do at the national office called the Intercultural Development Inventory, the IDI, which is a cultural assessment that measures my capacity as a person to navigate differences, to navigate someone who identifies as a different culture than my own. And do I have experiences with that? So if I was born in a town, let's say I was born in a town of Nebraska, I grew up in Nebraska, I've only worked in Nebraska, my whole family's in Nebraska, we've never gone anywhere else. I only have a monocultural experience. And so it's hard for me to be able to say I value multiculturalism if I've never experienced it in the first place. And we have a lot of organizations where we have, our organizations, our teams are made up of individuals, and each of those individuals have different life experiences. And so what we challenge every team, every organization is to start at the individual level, the self-awareness standpoint, assessing where are you so you can understand your starting point on the journey. And then as each individual moves and learning and expanding that lens and learning more about how do I expose myself to other cultures. And so if I have a monocultural experience, then how can I be intentional of gaining some new experiences that will help to broaden my lens? Then when each individual starts to add on to those experiences for self, the organization and team then moves forward along that continuum as well. And those continuums are absolutely valuable, but not valuable if you're not attending at the individual level first.
I absolutely agree with that. I've done a lot of those cultural assessments, and I found that, and I can say this, and a lot of people in this room have heard me say it before, the problem is old white dudes like me. That's the problem. And in organizations where I've helped facilitate these cultural assessments, they use it as a checklist. Well, we've done that. Let's move forward. And they never change anything. And it's frustrating to me to know that at least our State Department is making these changes globally, but we're not doing anything about it domestically. And it's just a big challenge.
I agree with you. I would challenge you to say it's not just old white dudes. So let's, and I think that came up in the conversation on the chat. It's not just that particular group, because that could be a generalization. There are definitely anybody of any group could still be a barrier in that journey based on whatever life experiences. There are people who look like me who may be a barrier to this work because they've only had one life lived experience. They haven't had, more multicultural experiences. And I know some old white individuals who are champions in this space and equity and leading these conversations for teams and organizations. So I do think it's important to recognize that we can change all of that for us moving forward. At the individual level starting though. Oh, absolutely. I live in Florida. We have this conversation all the time. Yes.
So this is Lyndon, and today we're seeing a lot of backlash against DEI efforts, right? Both in the educational environment, the corporate environment. So what's driving that? And some level, I think you talked about love at the root of it. And so I'm wondering if you can because there are people who are attacking these efforts who perhaps feel that this is evil, this is alienating them. And so I'm wondering, how do we address those needs on the other side as well that's driving the opposition?
Yeah, it's really, I don't like the metaphor eating an elephant one bite at a time, but that really is what it is. is because it's a scarcity mentality that's causing folks to respond the way that we're seeing in the climate of the world today. This fear of, if I make space for you, then I'm losing my space. If I give you a seat at the table, then I'm losing my seat. And that's not valid, but it's a real fear and insecurity. And we can't move where we want to move or see the needle move in this space until we address that at the individual level. And we have to do it one conversation, one interaction, one team, one organization at a time. It's going to take time. Yes, ma'am.
All right. What's coming up for me too is we talked yesterday about systems, and systems are in place to benefit those who built them. And so what's coming up for me, both in Charlie's question and Lyndon's question and thoughts, is the difference between niceness, and specifically white niceness, and kind. And anyone can fall into the white nice because we're assimilating or striving to fit into the system of privilege. And so when we talk about, like, it's not just old white dudes, it could be, you know, folks like Shanna said that look like her because they want to have privilege. They want to have a space at the table. So I need to assimilate into the system that's in place that was built by those in power. And so that's where that comes into of, like, we need to be kind and work towards the greater goal. And not being nice means I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm not going to speak up. I'm not going to step out of my comfort zone. I'm going to step back into that privilege to stay comfortable so that everybody's happy, right? And so we need to create systems and spaces to move to being kind, to create a kind, loving world. And so that would be my what was coming up for me in the questions that were asked. And I know you want to get to your activity, so I was trying to be quick.
Of you in these conversations is understanding when you have an interaction with someone that could be seen as negative or inequitable or even racist or whatever the term that you're going to apply to it may be. The challenge for us is to think about that mental model slide that I showed you earlier. Like, where is it coming from? Like, yeah, that thing really triggered me, or that really upset me, or I can't believe such and such did that, or this happened. But then now that we challenge ourselves to say, okay, from a lens of grace and kindness, where does that come from? What was that person's lived experience that caused them to say or do? Not to say that it was right or not to give them permission to do it again. We're going to have a conversation about it. But how do we get to a space of more understanding instead of reacting? And I'll share an example. I did a presentation in Rhode Island a few years ago in front of a whole bunch of CEOs, and most of them were white, but there were a couple people in Rhode Island who looked like me. And I did the presentation. It was about 60 CEOs. And when I finished the presentation at the end, folks came up to say thank you and shake my hand and tell me how amazing I was. And I had a counterpart with me who was white, a co-facilitator with me who was white. And we're both shaking hands and saying thank you with grace. And one of the CEOs walked up to me and shook my hand and said, "Shanna, you were phenomenal. I didn't expect you to be that articulate," is what he said. And in the moment, you know, I should have probably dug my nail in my finger. I didn't do that. In the moment, on the inside, I was like, what did he just say? What? But on the outside, I had to respond from a lens of grace and kindness and to say, I appreciate that. When you have a moment, can we talk about a little bit more about what you just shared? And he said, yes, absolutely. And you know, whatnot. And then, you know, I finished interacting with everyone, networking. And after dinner, I found this gentleman. I took him to the side because I didn't want to embarrass him in front of his peers. And I said, can you help me understand what you meant when you said what you said? Because for him, he truly saw it as a compliment. He truly did. And I said, can you share with me? And then I'm going to share with you how I received it. And what I shared with him was that I felt very minimized and belittled by his comment because I didn't understand, why did he assume I wouldn't be articulate? And would he have said, and what I asked him is, would you have said that same compliment to my counterpart? And he said no. And he was mortified how I received his comment. He was absolutely mortified. He was hurt. His eyes were tearing up. He couldn't believe that he had offended me in such a way. But the reality is his experience in life had been just that. He had never seen someone who looked like me, who could present and articulate, I guess, in the way, even in 2019, even in 2019, right? And so it's important for us to understand sometimes, not all the time, because I can name some people that aren't coming from that lens, but sometimes it really is at the core of it what someone's life experience has been, and then just having the opportunity and the courage to say, can we talk about that? because this is how it landed for us in that interaction. Yes, sir. Stephen. Oh, yes, what time is it? Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I understand. So so I have people on Zoom. I have to welcome, see your comments now soon. I want to make sure you all have voice in the space. And I'm here till tomorrow. So if anyone wants to talk offline, we can connect further as well. I do want to quickly run through this activity, how to do it, but I want to share it with you because I want you to do it in your free time. We had a conversation about it. Yeah, I love that. So we show the next slide, please. I want to talk about this metaphor briefly. We'll spend 2 minutes on it about your compass. We're talking about the journey to move from me to we, and how are we going to get there on that path. And often it's important to understand what tools we have to help guide us there or help us to achieve that direction. And I chose a compass instead of a GPS navigation system because a GPS navigation system tells you everything you need to do. It tells you, it's very directive. There's no room for interpretation or confusion. It's telling you, where a compass gives you the opportunity to decide for self. This is the recommendation. Here's the tool to help guide you, but it's up to you to choose how you're going to move forward in that direction or not. And as you move through the next slide, I want you to think about these things. And so if you want to take a picture of it, or I can, make sure it's up during the break. But I want you to think about, I put them around the room, north, south, east, or west. Virtually, I put breakout rooms for north, south, east, or west, but perhaps we can connect offline to figure out which one you chose and why. But I want you to think about, for me, for self, which one most resonates for me in my leadership and how I show up. From the north, if I choose north, the direction of north, then I tend to have a go-get attitude. Let's do it, let's move, let's right in. I tend to move fast, make decisions quickly, and go. That's north. If I'm east, I tend to be more speculative. I like to look at the big picture and the possibilities before making a decision. I'm more mindful about this decision. I understand a lot is at stake. If I'm south, I'm paying attention more around the carrying capacity, the people. I'm caring about the people. I'm thinking about how it's going to affect and impact every individual in this decision before moving forward. I want to make sure feelings are taken into consideration. And if I'm west, I'm paying attention to the detail. I want to know the who, the what, the when, the where, and why. And I want you to think about this for yourself. And at the break or wherever it shows up throughout the day, just go to that slide or that piece of paper on the wall or type it in the Zoom chat for us and we can unpack it later. But where am I and what does that look like for me? And if you hit the button one more time, please, you'll see the questions for you to think about. What are the strengths? If I'm north, what's the strength for me? If I know this is how I respond, what would I want people to know about me and why I'm north? What are the limitations? Where are my gaps? Where do I tend to have mistakes happen or occur? And then which one do I find the most difficult to work with? So if I'm the north, I may say, oh, I struggle with the south, or I struggle with the west. And it's a really fun exercise from a lens of self-awareness and understanding who you are, but then also understanding how other people may show up and that all four directions are just as important. And we're not going to do northeast or southwest or things in between. We're really being committed and thinking about the differences and the vibrance of our differences and how they're all valid and valuable. But at the end of the day, really choosing and deciding how we're going to move forward and recognizing that as we choose to follow the guidance of the compass, that there can be mistakes made along the way. And so that's the challenge for the activity for you. If you hit the next slide, I just want you to think about these takeaways before you go home at the end of the week. A compass always follows true north. Every leader should follow a set of unchangeable personal values. You can only know your true north when you know yourself. And that's this journey of me. You have to understand me before you can understand where you're going and before you can achieve that destination of belonging. And it's up to you to decide if you're going to move and be willing to make mistakes along the way, be willing to fail forward. So that is the activity challenge with you with. I'll leave that with you. The last quote, I think, is on the next slide for you to see. You can skip that one. This one. Ships don't sink because of the water around them. Ships sink because of the water that gets in them. Think about what's around you and what's happening in your day-to-day experiences. And if you're allowing it to get inside you and weigh you down, that will impact your journey from me to we. So think about that as well. I'll leave with that. I know over. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of the.
I'll see you.
John.
All right, thank you so much to Shanna for flying in super late last night and for leading that session. So we actually do have just a few minutes. This break we'll take it all the way to 10:30. So we'll start Zippy session at 10:30, and we do have a few minutes. What I have created for the hybrid or for the online participants is a mural board, so we can see them. Add that on there. You can join that as well, or you can use the pieces of paper that's around the wall. So we can actually start doing that. We do have a little longer of a break, and we'll make it up for lunch. So trust me, we'll get back on schedule. You'll have your hour-long lunch, but we can continue this conversation, and I hope the virtual participants can start doing that as well. Miriam, we know you wanted to ask some questions. Shanna is still here. We have the laptop up here. You can have that conversation with her as well. So thank you so much, Shanna.